So, hello to you all. I'm José Pedro Dias. I'm going to talk with you about the Flowtype. It's supposed to be a short introduction. We'll see how it goes. So, I'm the tech lead at SkyStore's web client team. So, SkyStore is a TVOD movie store online and then several clients. And I work for Sky, of course, here in Lisbon. This presentation is already online, so apparently no one has a laptop, which is great, but you could. So what I'm going to present, what is Flowtype after all? What can we obtain from it? I'm going to do a short comparison against TypeScript. It can be more expanded, this discussion, but it will depend if anyone's interested or not. Then I'm going to talk about its installation, usage, and the editor integration. It's very short. And then most of the talk will be a tour about the features. And in the end, I'm going to try to show you some troubleshooting ways. So, what is Flowtype? Flowtype is a static type checker for JavaScript, and it supports everything from early JavaScript implementations up to the recent proposals, such as 5.8 and such. And what can you benefit from using it? It follows the imports and exports of your modules. It checks the function calls, the signatures of the function calls, the types of the assignments. It's aware of global types, so it will break your code if you're not aware of an attribution possibly being null. You'll have to defend your code against it or mark it as I don't care. But hopefully you'll do the first one. And it allows you to do your annotations progressively, one file at a time, because you have a comment at flow, we'll see later. And finally, it exposes a lot of metadata, so IDEs can offer you additional information about your code. The nuclides page. I don't know which one of you know nuclide. It's an extension to the Atom editor, a bunch of packages which offer you additional widgets and additional languages, and it's by the same guys at Facebook, so it supports Flow very well. What's the cost of adding Flowtype to your project? Well, you have to understand a little bit how it works, and there's a learning curve about that. You can either annotate your modules or ignore the foreign dependencies, but that's a clear workaround, which I don't believe you should do this. We'll see it later on in the talk. And the quality of annotations is a compromise because you can be as strict as you want it to be. You can say the classes and the types, but you can say something as any and function instead of the exact function signature, etc. So some of these footnotes can be helpful if you review this presentation later on. There's some hints in here. Flowtype. I'll talk about this. So when do I think using Flowtype pays off? Well, if you're working by yourself, if it's a small project, if there's not too many strict types against your server or between modules, probably it doesn't pay off. But if you have a large team and you have several people working on modules at the same time, it helps you. It's helping us. So I can say by experience we have already adopted Flowtype for 3 months now, I believe. So this is from experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
how have you convinced everyone to use annotations?
Well, it's an ongoing process. Nowadays, all of our source code base is typed, but we have errors at the moment. It's not zero errors. So Flowtype at the moment isn't circle CI the go or don't go flag. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we're not there yet, but we're going to be in a month or two. I don't know. It depends. It's several people, the timing doesn't help, etc. Another thing is there are beautiful modules with simple APIs, and there are other ones which aren't. So if you're consuming modules with different signatures which can be error prone, it also helps you because we're human and we make errors. So I don't know which one which of you already tried TypeScript and want to discuss this. So okay. So these are questions you can pose me. Have you tried it? Isn't it more popular? Doesn't it provide all these features? Aren't the annotations similar? Mostly, yeah, all of these are correct. And the community of TypeScript is much bigger than Flowtype. But what can I say about it? TypeScript is a all-in solution, as far as I know. I've talked with what's your name? João, and there are workarounds around this, but what they propose is a all-in solution where TypeScript is similar to JavaScript, but does a lot of these tasks. It does type checking, transpilation, and bundling. I assume bundling. I'm not sure. Yeah, but what I'm proposing here is, if you're using the npm command line modules you already use, you just have to add this prior step here, where you type check your code, and Babel has a module which cleans all of the annotations from then on, and from then on you use exactly what you were using before. So this is what I already told you, I believe. It checks your code, provides suggestions, adds tooling, and nothing else. This is the Babel module I was talking about, which removes all the annotations. And then from then on, you can use Babel. You can also not use Babel at all if you don't need to transpile. You can use ES for all JavaScript with types. It's not forbidden by any means. So you can keep working as you were, using the modules you were before, and add this step to the flow. TypeScript does a lot more, as I said. So it's an all-in solution with the pros and cons that if you have an editor which supports TypeScript, you can do probably a lot more than Atom does. I'm not sure how they compare each other at the moment. I've checked TypeScript some months ago. So, how do you opt in for this journey of Flow? You install the Flow bin module, and you can do the flow init step, which creates a .flow script file with vanilla standards without anything relevant. I'll show you in a moment an example of a decent .flow script file. Then you have some commands you can do with Flow. Flow ls is relevant because it shows you all the files that Flow is currently inspecting. So you can, I don't use it very often, but it can be useful to check if you're missing something. Flow check does the validity one shot. It lists all the errors on all the modules it visited early on. And it also has a start-stop mode when the server keeps running and the IDE queries flow. So it's faster. The interaction is faster. So this is an example flow script file, flow config file. So you're not obliged to do this, but there are several advantages in ignoring the node modules directory. What you're saying by doing this is saying, Flow, you won't visit the modules I'm using. I'll grant you the static libs definitions I want for those modules. So it's a lot faster, and you can simplify loads of things because, as you know, node modules tend to import other node modules, so it's a huge tree and it's harder. These are some of the flags you can enable to use more advanced features of the latest proposals. And this last line here is a way of saying, if I do a cardinal flow expect error comment, the following line, I want to know the errors about the following line. So it's a workaround. By the way, this funky regex is because I believe it uses, what's the name of the language? This is done in, I don't recall, whatever. Okay, so OCaml, exactly. Thank you. So I already told you that by default, if you don't have the comment @flow, the file won't be inspected. So you can opt in a file at a time or a bunch of files which are related, unless you do the flag all, and then it will visit all of them, which you want to do. Flow suggest is interesting because for the most trivial annotations, Flow can suggest them for you. So if you have a module and point to it, it will give you a diff about comparing the current version of your file and the annotated version for the things he could find for you. There are several ways to integrate Flowtype with your editor / IDE. I stick with Nuclide, and I haven't checked the other ones recently, but there are other combinations which offer more or less the same features. So, on to the core of the presentation. Do you have any doubts so far? So Flow knows a lot about JavaScript. So it has definitions for the most common things about common JavaScript, the global functions, the browser object model, document object model, CSS, Node.js, and even React because it's Facebook. And it's TypeScripting Facebook, it's not easy. So, sorry, React is not easy. So it's good that they did it themselves. Other built-ins, you have any, which is sort an asterisk because you're saying anything goes in here, and any sticks. So down the line, Flowtype won't try to understand what it casted to. Mixed, it's very similar to any, but at the point as you're consuming the result of calling a function which returns mixed, you have to cast it to something else. So it's an any where you're promised to change the type. It's less of a compromise. So let's start slowly. You have a variable and you do colon number, so it knows it's a number. Flowtype identifies it does type inference. So there are lots of things which you aren't obliged to type yourself, like this one. But the thing is, where will you stop this process? So for me, it's easier to type everything, or most things. So I would do this annotation, but this one for sure wasn't necessary. Then you can type function arguments. So we're saying that the first argument is of type string, the second argument is of type boolean, it returns a number, and the second argument can be omitted, okay, because it has the question mark. Yeah. This one is a function itself, so it's signature. So we're using the array map function, which you already know, right? And this time we're saying that the arrow function receives a string and a number and returns a string, right? So we're returning a template string. Now, here, this one is more valuable because in here we're stating that the callback as a definite signature. We only accept functions which accept a number as argument and returns void. Then, of course, it wouldn't be nice to always having to describe everything in detail. So you can define types and import them later on. So instead of saying that a guy is an object with attribute name of type string and age of type number, you can, for instance, say that a person is the same, and later on say guy is a person. No one said you couldn't create aliases for things such as a string. This is a stupid example just for the sake of it. Then you have complex types. You already seen a type here. Let's assume you were using classes already. You could continue using classes and you didn't have to create types for it. You just type the arguments, annotate the arguments. An employee, you can see that an employee is similar, in this case I did it on purpose, is similar to a class, but this time it doesn't have to be explicitly defined in the code. It can be, for instance, from an external API, you accept this, but you're not defining it. And there's optional optional attributes. You already saw nullables, which I'm going to display later on, but the thing is quite similar. The thing is, if you say that a person is age, number, question mark, you're saying that the attribute age can be a number or can be a null. But if you put the question mark prior to the colon, you're saying that the key itself can be omitted. It's an interesting difference, because you could, for instance, say that the age is optional and is of type any, but you say so there's a you can do all these sorts of different types.
The position of the question mark is switched from the previous examples, from the start to the end. Is for these cases, or is?
Let me. Didn't I? No, I skipped the null types. Strange. We'll get there, but the thing is, imagine you're saying that a variable or the argument can be null. In several, the thing is, for function arguments, it's exactly the same. If the last argument has a question mark, not passing it is the same of passing undefined, right? But for literals, for object literals, it's not, because if you're putting the question mark over here, you're saying that you have to pass an age, all right? Even if it's null, you have to pass the key. So
Can you have age question mark column question mark number?
mind blown. I believe you can, but it's exactly the
Because to me,
same.
with your description, what that says right there is you can have the field as you have there,
Yeah.
with just name n,
Yes.
but if you have the age field,
Exactly.
it cannot be null. So you cannot put age column null.
Right, you can't.
But if you put age question mark column then question mark number,
Yeah.
you can have
You
age,
can. You support both scenarios. Yes, exactly.
column null.
That's a funky interface, but yeah, you could. Yeah.
Just for comparison, TypeScript only recently gained the doable types. So
Right.
they only support as it is there.
Okay.
You can have
Okay.
age or not before having this support,
Mhm.
that I didn't even investigate right now. You can have age optionally, but it can be anything. It can be null, it can be undefined, it can be. It doesn't do the check that supposedly does.
Yeah. Then you have some kind of templating where you can specify types as variables for the annotation to use. So if you have an array where you know for sure that all the elements are strings, you should type it as array of string. It's more strict than array of asterisk, right? Or array of n. Promise. It's a very interesting example because that's a place where we can be commit many errors. So what the promise does, what the promise template does, is tell you what is the return type for the promise resolve type. Okay. So I'll get back to this. When you're using objects as hashes, you can define those also. You have this annotation which resembles the ES6. I don't know the name of the feature, where you can variabilize the key. So you're saying, in the last example, you're saying that this is an object where all the keys are strings, of course, and the values are also strings, and it breaks if an attribution is made where they aren't. Then you have union types, which can be other types or strings, or a combination of both, or functions, or combination of both. As you can see here, there are several APIs when you, for instance, can accept an array or an array of strings, a string or an array of strings. You can create a type for that and use it. We don't have, as far as I know, enums in Flowtype, and I know TypeScript does. It can be sort of emulated, but it's not the same. The closest we have to enums is a combination of creating a type and creating an object of all the keys and their values, which kind of sucks, but it's what we have. Then we have intersection types. This example again it's kind of stupid because we're intersecting two literals, but imagine this could be complex types already, and you can do an intersection of both. So I'm returning to the promise case I was discussing earlier on. When you have promises, and oftentimes we have now for asynchronous code, we can return a promise of t where t is the resolve type. And the funny thing, if you have async await, you can do a perfect match between the two. What I mean is, if you have an async function which returns string, for instance, it's exactly the same as you saying it has the return type of promise string, because in the end it's exactly what it will do. I believe this is correct. There's a mapping, a perfect mapping between these features. And you haven't asked, but you can't type the exception case, because exception can be anything. You can throw anything, so it's very hard to defend about that. So they didn't. So what can happen when you say that something could be a string or null? If you don't defend the code against the possibility of it being null, if you later on use it as a string, if you are optimistic, it will break, and it will say you have to do a branch where you resolve this in some way. And the most succinct way of doing it is do a comparison with just two errors, the two equal signs, or you can be more descriptive. So if in that function, if in that part of the code, you have you could have null, as long as you treat that part away with an early return, or put all the string assumption code inside of an if, it will work from then on. This can be a little bit painful to annotate if you already have a large code base, but it pays off because we in JavaScript tend to be very optimistic, and sometimes you don't defend against your own code, your server code, third parties, etc. Another example, a little bit more contrived but also possible. Synthetic events are from React, but it would work exactly the same if I would have here an event, just an event. So imagine if you have a React component and it has a handle change email event listener. What I'm doing here is I'm getting an email assuming that the target is an input element, but at this point it wasn't sure. Nothing tells Flowtype that this is the case. You can for sure add event type, add event listener to an element which isn't an input element, so it can not have a value. So what we're doing here is we're making sure that the event is of the correct type, so the value returns what we expected it to do. So this is another example of a kind of painful thing to annotate.
When you started to use Flowtype, did you discover many bugs on the code like this one? For example, not checking the value?
Well, the thing is, oftentimes we aren't as generic in our application of event handlers as in order to get this kind of error. But yes, sometimes this happened, and this one for sure happens a lot. Yeah. There are other contrived examples, such as the API signature is borked, and that you get it for free. That isn't hard to annotate. These are some useful types. Any function can be annotated props in the state signatures. and it enforces you to have all of this defined.
One question: when you're specifying the type, can you, or the arguments you're going to receive, can you specify like allow one nodes? For example, when you call an API and the response, you have the name, the ID, and you have a lot of other stuff that you just don't care about. Is there any way for you to specify that I want to get all the answer must have these two keys but ignore the others, or
As long as you're not consuming those keys, there's no problem at all, because it doesn't run in runtime. It's compile time check. So, but if you're consuming an attribute of an object which isn't defined, it will say, I don't know where this comes from. So then on, you have to add it. This is very relevant if you're using import export notation already. You can do import type instead of import. What does this give you? This makes the import work only for flow. Example, this happens in our project. We have we have a models directory with all the models from the API, combinations of those models. And we have a common types kind of thing where we have the array of functions and stuff like that. Array of strings and very common types. Of course, if you're in another model, you have to import those. But the thing is, if the type is only required for Flowtype to work, you don't need the import to work all the way down to the end code.
Yeah, because it is going to be removed when we...
Yeah, the Babel task, yeah. And this is very, very important if you have module loops. For instance, if you have an asset that requires a link, and the link that requires an asset because of just flow, import type will fix the problem. Webpack would break with an infinite loop, and this way it doesn't. This happened to us already. Globals are a way of consuming external stuff, things that aren't defined in your source code. So, for instance, if you have Uglify adding variables in a closure or something like that, and a module using it for instance, the app version is already also a production example. You can say, believe me, app version exists and it is of type string, and you can use it in that module. The second example is, well, jQuery exists, I don't care, it's a function, it's the ugliest compromise you can do, but it works. Or of course you could do import jQuery altogether, etc. But we don't have jQuery, so this is a contrived example. So external libraries. This step here is very relevant. Imagine you have, for instance, Lodash, as we do. We're iteratively adding signatures as we require those functions, one at a time, because this isn't in Flowtyped. Flowtyped is a GitHub module, GitHub repository, where anyone can add type defs for common modules. But the thing is, oftentimes your own usage of the modules aren't all that good or not that complete. So I haven't submitted my own type defs just yet. But you can define external libraries definitions. And I was saying very recently, I believe this week, the guys from Flowtype wrote a blog post promoting Flowtyped, which is an npm command line thingy that fetches for you external module definitions, and it does a very nice thing, which is If it doesn't have it there, it tries to create the skeleton for you so you can type them yourself. So the learning curve, it's a bit less painful this way. So to wrap it up, I don't know, I'm about time.
It's 50.
Okay, so I'm good for 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So some knowledge from the trenches. So we annotated a large project and it's ongoing, or at the moment it's not finished or perfect. What I can say is elect an island of things that don't depend on any other thing, and start from there, from branches of features, and go up until you, in the end, can annotate all the code. Otherwise, you always have to do compromises about types that aren't yet annotated. You can, of course, not let Flowtype annotate some files just yet, and do it later on. Some problematic modules where you see that you will require more experience to annotate yourself, you can leave it on, and believe me, you will learn. And of course, you can be less precise the first time around, using any function, using the trick about ignoring the next line errors. That works a lot. And of course, you will reiterate, and your code will be better as at each iteration. And then all the things I said earlier on about all the types of the common lib, node, the DOM, BOM, etc. They are all defined in Flow itself. So I learned a lot by looking at the declarations of standard lib functions, for instance. And you can do it too. Some troubleshooting, suppress comment I already told you. So imagine that this is not a hard issue, the console log, but the thing, what I was trying to illustrate here is I'm saying that the type has only key9, and I'm using the edge key, and this is a contract example, but it could be a very hard thing to implement. And if you do this, Flowtype can't complain about this line. Any errors on the following line. So this works. And there are cases are seldomly used. You oftentimes don't need to do any cast, but you can do very weird things if you cast to end, because casting to end allows you to do things such as this. Casting to number by casting to end. So don't do it like this. The most useful example I know of using annotations is with a mixed type. So if you say, for instance, if you have a function which returns a very complex type, you can annotate the return type as mixed, and in your consuming of that function, you just have to cast it to what you expect it to be. So then there's the flowing mode. I've never used it, but supposedly it doesn't do as much as type inference as Flow does normally. So it won't try to understand many of the type inferences and blame it for those. So I don't see much relevance in using it. And of course you can remove the flow comments for models that are breaking your code at the moment that you're. So to wrap it up, Some references. Flow has pretty decent documentation, but apart from the documentation, you're mostly on your own. There are, yeah, that's true. There are a couple of, I can say 4 or 5 guys doing blog posts about esoteric usage of the Flowtype, but most of them aren't even in the docs. So you have to learn from the docs and experience and people like me. Then you have TryFlow, which is somewhat of a browser editor with Flow, but it's very contrived because you only have 1 file, so there's not much you can do. But it's a starting point. You can do this. Flowtype I already explained to you. It's both the repository and the command line tool, which allows you to fetch definitions and create skeleton definitions for you. Then there are 2 guide. I don't recall very much. Is somewhat of introductory material such as this one. But Jeff Morrison's talk is very interesting because it explains you how Flowtype works. It's very, very interesting. If you're into that, I think you should check it out. So these are the image credits for the things you saw in the background from Flickr. And then if any comments and
Question. Can you generate docs with it? Can I have like docs?
I believe so. There's documentation.js.
Does it use Swell for that?
Documentation.js supports annotations flow users. In my millions of errands, I supposedly would check it out, but I haven't yet. But I've read that it supports the annotation, so it could be a good fit for some project adopting Flowtype.
Pretty cool. Like what I was thinking, like if we can get that to work really nicely, we can have a tool like GoDoc, which just generates documentation for code. And we go just like to like the top 100 couple of projects to like generate documentation for that, and create an API on top of that documentation, which makes it very nice to feel like you for that. So that like can like immediately require module,
But you
finally know what to have in the.
But you skip the step there because those modules aren't yet.
Oh, right. Like, yeah, you will have to like at least.
So
that's why I said like top 1,000.
Yeah, what the flow suggest module does is not a pretty decent type inference. It does a lot in the attributions, for instance.
Yeah.
But it can I believe it can. I don't use it. I don't commonly use it. But I believe it can predict some things like the promise type or more complex examples. But yeah, that's an interesting idea to explore.
Yeah, it will be the way to convince the JavaScript people finally love that. Like, just give them a tool, like,
I guess the problem is more broad because most modules don't have 2 lines of an API definition, and that makes me very angry.
But those are really not very good.
You have
something that everyone says is very cool, and like you spend like one day reading the good code.
You have oftentimes 2 paragraphs showing this is great and fast and amazing, and it doesn't give you any.
Really fast.
That's also help. Yeah, and we're using Jest also, and that brings a different set of problems because Jest has the Jest function, has methods to function themselves. And you check it out. It's a little bit like the mocks of, for instance,
Yeah, but in Just you need to explicitly say that you.
we currently have a problem in Jest because in test I didn't find a decent way of saying in this module, functions can have the jest API also. Can you understand my problem?
Functions that have
Additional function arguments. But I haven't opened the issue so far, so it's not problem. So the definitions in the types themselves, the tests themselves are not as good because of the things that we.
An off-topic question. Have you tried to get just snapshot?
Where it worked automatically. We don't currently test components. We don't use just for testing components. But we have testers and we have end-to-end tests for that. So we haven't checked it out, but it's very, very good thing to do.
I just read it and
They change a lot of things in that version. They change all the defaults from mock to unmock. It might make this work a little bit, but
I think there was another question around.
Question. Talk about the snappiness of the interactive development.
Yeah.
Because one of the advantages of a dynamic language like JavaScript, you can change something, pass in the browse, you can change the back. How does it delay your workflow?
That's an excellent question because I didn't say something that it's very relevant here. So in something like NoPipe or any other decent IDE integration with Flowtype, instead of using a command line check command, it spawns a server with several threads and it queries the threads as you're typing. So it's snappy. And what's interesting about it is we oftentimes in JavaScript do hot reloads and checking the functions the code keeps working. And I ended up doing a lot less of those because a whole bunch of errors are caused earlier on. You do have to go to the browser to check that the function has a typo or the import module has a typo, the path is incorrect, something like that. So, as I said before, it's a compromise that probably doesn't pay off for a very small example, for a very small project with one or two guys. But if you have an in-tier project, then I believe you should check it out. And of course, it's easier if you're bootstrapping something from the ground up, which was our case. It's even easier because you think it ahead of time and you have everything done from early on. This compromise I told you before about the island. The thing is, you have to be a little bit patient and careful about the path you're taking to enter your code, because sometimes you have to rotate a lot of modules in order to get rid of errors which are related.
Just one more comment regarding the comparison with TypeScript. So I've used TypeScript. You can move to the slide that we discussed before.
I can be challenging in this section, of course.
So my point here is that this is the only slide that I disagree, because yes, we can use, we are using TypeScript just to do the static type checking, but then we are generating ES6, and then we are using Babel all the same, bundling with Webpack, etc., etc. So you don't have to use, although TypeScript offers that possibility to use all that chain, we don't use it. And I'm not sure many people are using it for bundling. Most people are using Webpack, etc., etc.
I can be wrong about it, but They support it, right?
They support it, yes. I'm not sure that everybody's using it because there are other solutions which are more effective, etc., etc.
It's great to have people with
to me,
TypeScript.
We were discussing before why did I end up choosing TypeScript versus Laravel, and I remember in the meantime the reason was much wider support for all libraries and APIs. So when you have a very large project, that really makes a difference to not have to define APIs to lots and lots.
The thing is, the two projects are working in tandem, and sometimes they cross-pollinate each other. The normal types which landed in recently are from the ground up in Flowtype. And I believe there probably are some features the other way around. You're correct, the community of TypeScript is much larger. And there are more unaffected types. I don't know, is it there alien annotations or Flowtype? Yeah, because
the only major difference is the non-nullable types.
Yeah.
While there is the question mark before the type. On TypeScript, the implementation they did was using union types. So what you say is number.
Yeah, you can do it also.
Number or null.
Yeah, you can do it the same way to get a short.
Because all the rest is practically the same. I think I read somewhere that they are working on somewhere in the near future for instance syntax.
And they do in some ways they do, because there are aliases. I'm not sure if it's exactly now alias, but interface is a keyword that is acceptable in Flowtype also. But if I ask you, if you were starting from the ground up and the annotations were exactly the same, would you use TypeScript?
I would choose TypeScript because I would always use a lot of libraries. The reason I might use Flow is because currently Flow has a slightly better type checking than not just checking, but inferences. And that to me is the main argument for Flow.
And it's trickier by default. Now I'm not sure if it's anymore because of me, but it used to be. Okay. So